John Pilcher, you have criticized the role of the media when covering international conflicts. What are your biggest concerns?
Well, my biggest concern is that journalists don't merely report wars, they promote wars, they beat the drums of wars, they help wars begin. So they play a role other than reporting wars. And I'm not talking about all journalists. There are many fine correspondents who do a good job, but often they are the honourable exceptions to a system that encourages journalism to speak for governments.
How can you say that?
How can I say it?
Yeah.
Well, I just said it. It's very easy because it's the truth. And I've been reporting wars for a very long time, and that's my experience. And if you ask how can it be said, cast your mind back to the Iraq War. If journalists had done their job and investigated the lies that led up to that war, questioned them seriously, and I'm talking about the United States, where journalism really matters mainly, to a certain degree in Britain as well, but mainly the United States. Had journalists done that job instead of amplifying and echoing the deceptions, then according to many distinguished journalists now in the United States, such as Dan Rather, who I interviewed, the CBS anchor, that war, that invasion may not have happened. That's how I can say it.
Because we didn't investigate what?
I didn't investigate that there were no weapons of mass destruction.
That
was the rationale, you may remember, for attacking Iraq, and there were none.
What do you think about the phenomenon embedded?
Well, most journalists are embedded, and it doesn't apply to war. In fact, the most serious embedding happens right here in studios, where journalists reflect the view of the broadcasting institution or the view of a media consensus. Political writers, particularly, are embedded. They're embedded around the government. They certainly are in Britain, and they themselves say that. And in war, where lives are at stake, the embedding means that, and I've been embedded myself, it means that you have often very little choice but to reflect the view of the force that you're with, or to reflect the to report what you're shown, to give a certain point of view. If you're independent, then you have other choices.
Yeah, but we invited you as an independent, and we have the right for free speech in our studio, don't we?
I don't know your program very well. Do you have free speech in your program all the time? I'm not sure you do, but I don't know your program very well, so I can't really speak.
Do you think the media are intentionally
We're not
blurring?
talking about your program.
No, we are not. We are not. Indeed, we are not.
So that's probably not wise to discuss something I don't know very well.
Well, let's discuss what you really know a lot about. Do you think the media are intentionally blurring the truth?
Well, it's been going on for such a long time. It's a very old thing. It's been... The last British war reported without censorship was actually the Crimea in the mid-19th century. And the most embedded war was probably the First World War. I've reported a number of wars, and including Vietnam. There was in Vietnam I would say a voluntary embedding. In other words, the reasons for being there were not often addressed, were not often challenged. The tactics were challenged, and the tactics were often criticized, but the actual reason for being there. So you could come out of a war like Vietnam, in which 3 million people died in a total travesty, and in the United States, people will be saying, not least President Reagan, that it was a noble cause. Made some mistakes, yes, but it was a noble cause.
You have been covering conflicts for decades. What can you say about the change in journalism during those years in conflict areas?
I think journalists have many more restrictions on them now. I feel a great deal of sympathy for my colleagues who now have to cover, because they have to be on the end of a microphone almost all the time, a satellite phone. You know, they can have e-messages running through their brains. They never have time to think. I think I'd hate it if I was doing it now. So that said, I think journalists do have a responsibility to recognize what these restrictions lead to, and they lead to an even greater embedding, I believe, than ever before. When a producer can ring you up in the middle of the night and say what's happening, and you don't know what's happening, but you've got to say something. I think we need a bit of rebellion.
I would like to see the Constitution restored.
Are you living on the same planet as me? That's never going to happen.
This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them.
Well, I'm standing here with Jim Rubens, who is a candidate for U.S. Senate here in New Hampshire. And it's okay. I'll hold on to it. But
perfect. Yeah.
I guess a couple questions I have. Were you at the Liberty of, what is it called? The Liberty where Rand Paul was. What was that event called?
It was the Liberty Forum, right? In Nashua? Is that what you're talking about?
No, there was an event this week, or I guess last week, and I can't remember what they called it. But Rand Paul was there, Donald Trump was there. Did you happen?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Did you happen to go by that?
Yes, I was there. Yeah.
So you're doing better than me.
Yeah. I was there. Yeah. I'm everywhere.
Did you happen to see the video of this Iraq War veteran that got kicked out of the event?
I did not see that.
Did you hear about it?
I did not hear about it.
Under what circumstances should an event that's, billed to be pro-liberty be kicking people out for having the wrong views or whatnot?
Please explain to me what were his views?
Well, I guess he was just he was taking pictures and interviewing someone. I'm not sure how much of his views he was actually expressing until they start kicking him out.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it's private property. Supposedly they have the right, but it's a Rand Paul event. He's supposed to stand for liberty, and do you think he should be kicking people out?
I don't know the circumstances enough to know, but I know a lot of people were taking pictures, and Shaheen trackers have been taking pictures of me since June when I began campaigning. It's part of life.
What do we want? Healthcare. When do we want it? Now.
If you're in the public sphere, you ought to be comfortable having people who might have views adverse to yours taking pictures of you and asking you questions. If you can't answer questions from people with differing points of view, you shouldn't be in politics.
The Shaheen tracker.
I don't know the circumstances.
That's a big backhanded compliment.
I'm not complimenting that tracker. We do feed him occasionally.
Okay, well,
to keep him happy.
I guess another question.
But their objective is not to. Their objective is not to enhance public debate. It's to get you gotcha moment, put it on TV out of context. So you got to consider that also.
Right, I've seen it done, and if I were a politician, it would have been done to me.
Exactly. It's part of life being a politician. If you're not comfortable, speaking to members of the public whose views might differ with your own, then you probably shouldn't be in politics. And I know candidates who feel that way.
So much here. It's great to see her here.
Like Jeanne Shaheen, she has not had an open public forum where the public can ask and be given answers to unfiltered questions in years.
Oh, speaking of which, if you were to become senator, can you guarantee me that you would have your forums in some place other than these fortified federal compounds?
Exactly. You're making my case for me. I will guarantee that to you. That's what I did when I was state senator. I was accessible to the public. I managed to return every phone call during my time in office.
Well, thank you, and I certainly hope that in movie theaters we can be a little quieter. So here's what I wanted to say.
If you like Jeanne Shaheen, become a creature of Washington, a career politician, insulated from the people, you lose the ability to represent the people of your state, and that's where she's at right now. We need a candidate for U.S. Senate who's connected to the people of the state and serious about solving our nation's problems.
There are, I guess, probably about twice as many countries now as there were 25 or 30 years ago. And sooner or later, the secession bug is going to hit the United States. When it does, are your loyalties with New Hampshire or with Washington?
You mean the extent to which a state like California could divide itself into parts?
No, I'm thinking more like, I mean, personally, I would like to see New Hampshire independent.
Successing from the Union. I don't see any merit to that, I'm afraid to say.
So you want us to continue having to live under Washington rule with all these terrible rules that will never go away?
I would like to see the Constitution restored. We have the 10th Amendment, which, and the 9th Amendment, in combination of which grant to the states.
Are you living on the same planet as me? That's never going to happen.
Well, it's what the Constitution... We have the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, and there Dan Feinstein, a senator and peer of Jeanne Shaheen, is proposing licensing journalists. You're a journalist. Okay, would you like to be licensed?
No, can't do that.
Federal agents on the streets of Keene, New Hampshire. They're investigating reports of an unlicensed radio station said to be broadcasting LRN.FM. So why all the fuss? What is LRN.FM? Well, it's probably not something these agents want you to listen to. It's a 24-hour news talk broadcast, all pro-liberty. A true authoritarian-free zone. Tune in at LRN.FM to listen or broadcast their signal. LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them.